We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. And today, we are telling you a story that power would rather you ignore. What you are about to hear is not rumor, not speculation, not internet gossip. This is a story that unfolded in plain sight on Capitol Hill, under oath, in front of the United States Senate. A story about Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, a man who said one thing to the public for years and then said something very different when the receipts were read out loud. A story about Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender, and the people who kept orbiting him long after they claimed they were disgusted. A story about lies minimization and a Trump regime that promised transparency while delivering excuses. Let's begin where the cameras began. Howard Lutnick walked into the United States Senate surrounded by reporters, microphones shoved in his face, questions firing from every direction. Did you have financial involvement with Jeffrey Epstein? Why did you keep contact with him? After he pled guilty to sex crimes, Democrats are calling for your resignation. What do you say? Why did you mischaracterize your relationship? Why did you say you found him gross but stayed in touch? Lutnick did not answer. He deflected. I look forward to testifying today. Give us some space. I'm going to speak to Congress right now. No denial, no clarification. Just the familiar body language of someone hoping the hearing room doors would close before the real questions began. But the questions followed him inside. For years, Howard Lutnick told a neat little story. In 2005, he said, after buying a New York City townhouse next door to Jeffrey Epstein, Epstein invited him over for coffee. Epstein offered a tour. Lutnick claimed he walked into a room with a massage table, candles, and a vibe so disturbing that he and his wife immediately left. He said Epstein leaned in and talked about the right kind of massage. Lutnick said that in the few steps it took to walk back home, he and his wife decided he would never be in the same room with that disgusting person ever again. Not socially. Not in business, not in philanthropy. One and done. He repeated this story publicly to the New York Post, to Miranda Devine. He emphasized how obvious Epstein's perversion was. He mocked others for missing it. He said Bill Gates and others must have participated. He speculated about blackmail tapes. He spoke as if he were uniquely moral, uniquely perceptive, uniquely clean. And then the Epstein files were released. Those files told a very different story. Not one interaction, not two, not three. At least 8 meaningful interactions after 2005. Emails, appointments, coordination. A trip in December 2012 where Howard Lutnick, another family, their children, and their nannies traveled to Jeffrey Epstein's private island after Epstein had already been convicted, after Epstein had already pled guilty to soliciting a minor, after Epstein's name was synonymous with sex crimes. And shortly after that island visit, Lutnick entered into a business transaction where he was effectively a business partner with Epstein on a deal. So when Howard Lutnick sat before the Senate, he had a lot of explaining to do. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen did not waste time. He reminded Lutnick of his own words. The emphatic claim that he was disgusted in 2005 and cut off all contact forever. Then he asked the question that shattered the story. Did you in fact visit Jeffrey Epstein's private island? In December of 2012, Lutnick's answer was careful, defensive, and revealing. Yes, he said he had lunch with Epstein on the island, but it was just lunch, just an hour. He was on a boat, on a family vacation. His wife was there, his 4 children were there, nannies were there, another couple and their children were there. Everyone was together, nothing improper, nothing untoward. He didn't recall why they did it. Think about that for a moment. A man who claims Epstein was so disgusting he would never be in the same room with him again somehow cannot recall why he brought his children to lunch on Epstein's island 7 years later. Van Hollen pressed harder. Why do the Epstein files show you coordinating meetings with Epstein, planning the visit? Emails over years. Lutnick minimized. He said he met Epstein when Epstein moved next door. Over 14 years. He claimed he met him only 2 other times. He could recall maybe 10 emails total. No relationship. Barely anything to do with him. Millions of documents, he said. But only a handful mention his name. But then the Senate read those mentions out loud. Van Hollen asked about exchanging nannies. Did Lutnick know whether the nanny on the island trip was the same nanny Epstein expressed interest in meeting? Lutnick said he had no idea. Didn't recall, didn't know. Claimed it had nothing to do with him. Van Hollen reminded him of the obvious. Epstein was a convicted sex offender. Not a great place for kids or nannies. Was Ghislaine Maxwell on the island? Lutnick said no. Then came the question that cut to the heart of it. When you visited the island, where did you see anything inappropriate? Lutnick answered that the only thing he saw was staff working for Epstein. Van Hollen reminded him again. This visit happened after Epstein's conviction. Lutnick had said he knew Epstein was bad in 2005. Yet in 2012, he went anyway. Had lunch, had appointments. Did he also have dinner at Epstein's New York home in 2011 with Woody Allen? Lutnick denied it. Said he didn't know what Van Hollen was referring to. Claimed there was only a document about a 1-hour meeting at 5 o'clock, not dinner. Then Lutnick doubled down. To the best of his memory, he met Epstein 3 times over 14 years. Nothing wrong, nothing improper. No fear when reviewing the documents, because he and his wife know he did nothing wrong in any possible regard. But memory is not evidence. Another senator read out a timeline compiled from the Epstein files. In 2009, Lutnick wanted to speak with Epstein and asked for his phone number. In 2011, there was an appointment for drinks. In 2012, planning a family trip to the private island. In 2013, exchanging information about intellectual property and gambling, subjects of shared interest, both signing up for an investment. In 2017, a fundraiser email described Epstein as a close friend of the Lutnicks. 8 interactions after 2005. That is not one and done. That is a pattern. And this is where Donald Trump enters the story. Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files. Transparency, truth, accountability, drain the swamp. But the moment those files began implicating people in his orbit, the tone changed. Suddenly everyone just glanced at their name. Suddenly memory became foggy. Suddenly the burden shifted from disclosure to denial. Howard Lutnick is not just some random businessman. He is Trump's Commerce Secretary, a cabinet official, a man who appears on Fox News praising Trump's power, strength, and dominance. A man who says you can feel Trump's power washing over you in the room. A man who says Trump wears him out because he is the strongest human being he knows. A man who openly glorifies Trump while dodging questions about, this is not an accident. This is how the regime works. Loyalty up, accountability down. When asked about poverty statistics, Lutnick couldn't even answer. How many Americans live at or below the poverty line, despite overseeing the Census Bureau? But when it comes to defending Trump, praising Trump, amplifying Trump, his memory is sharp, his words are flowing, his admiration endless. Meanwhile, the Epstein questions are met with amnesia, minimization, and technicalities. Lunch, not dinner. An hour, not a day. 10 emails, not 20. 3 meetings, not 8. Always just short of a full confession. Always just enough to deny intent. And let's be clear, this is not about proving what Lutnick did or did not do on Epstein's island. This is about honesty. About consistency, about telling the same story before and after the files were released, about not misleading the public and Congress. Howard Lutnick told the country he cut off all contact in 2005. That was false. He told the public he was never in the room with Epstein again. That was false. He told the Senate he barely interacted with Epstein. The files say otherwise. And Donald Trump, the man who promised to expose Epstein's network, put this man in power. This is why people are angry. This is why resignation is being demanded, not because of rumors, but because of contradictions, because of lies by omission, because the truth keeps changing depending on who is asking the questions. Today we share a story you must hear in full, because Donald Trump just announced what amounts to his new revenge plot, and it's not subtle. It isn't quiet. It's as brazen and thin-skinned as the man himself. This story isn't about spin or debate. It's about how a former president, now again in the highest office, is weaponizing his position to punish dissent, ignore law, and push beyond the boundaries of constitutional restraint. Let's begin. Donald Trump continues to assault the basic norms of American governance, the norms of decorum, of bipartisan cooperation, and of respect for law and constitutional limits. He doesn't merely challenge these norms, he flouts them with visible resentment. We've seen him avoid bipartisan rooms simply because he might have to confront disagreement. We've seen him treat dissent not as a check on power but as a personal insult. And now we are seeing the evidence play out on the national stage. Earlier this week, breaking reports confirmed that President Trump has disinvited Democratic governors from what has long been a bipartisan meeting at the White House with state leaders, a meeting traditionally organized in cooperation with the National Governors Association, NGA. This isn't a small event. For decades, presidents from both parties have hosted governors, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, to discuss pressing issues facing states and the nation. These sessions are opportunities for cooperation on disaster relief, infrastructure funding, public health, and more. This year, Trump chose to make it Republican only. The White House says the president can invite whoever he wants to events at the People's House. But that defense masks something deeper, a deliberate exclusion. According to reporting, no Democratic governor was invited to the formal business meeting that was scheduled for February 20th between governors, the president, and White House officials. And at least two Democratic governors, Maryland's Wes Moore and Colorado's Jared Polis, were specifically excluded from a White House dinner. This isn't tradition. It's not cooperation. It is cleaving the machinery of governance into us versus them. And it is a radical break from bipartisan norms. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat, slammed the decision on national television, saying he would not attend the dinner because leaving out Moore and Polis was wrong. The NGA itself, tasked with representing all 55 U.S. governors, said the White House meeting was an important tradition and expressed disappointment that this year's event had become partisan. Acting NGA CEO Brandon Tatum said disinviting individual governors undermined federal-state collaboration at a moment when unity was critical. Democratic governors went further. A majority announced they would boycott the dinner entirely in protest of the snub. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, who is the vice chair of the National Governors Association, spoke out bluntly about the exclusion. Moore was elected to that position by his peers, Democrat and Republican alike. Yet President Trump chose to exclude him from a bipartisan tradition he helped lead. Moore called that exclusion a snub, blatant disrespect, and a blow to the spirit of bipartisan federal-state partnership. Moore even noted on CNN that, as the nation's only black governor, being singled out carried added weight, a message that the White House has not clearly denied. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, another excluded Democrat, called the decision disappointing and said he had not been given a reason for being left off the guest list. To be clear, this wasn't about scheduling, conflicts, or misunderstandings. The invitation list was deliberately curated to exclude Democrats from core events and even two prominent Democrats from the ancillary dinner. This president, who often brags about his strength, can't tolerate the presence of governors who may disagree with him. That tells you everything you need to know about the fragility of his ego and the pettiness of his leadership. But this is only part of the broader picture of Trump's new authoritarian-leaning moves. There is another front where his contempt for constitutional limits has been on stark display, his growing willingness to escalate military action without seeking approval from Congress, especially in Latin America. Over the past year, the United States under Trump has conducted multiple military strikes targeting alleged Venezuelan drug cartel vessels in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific actions that have led to the deaths of dozens of people. The administration has claimed these strikes are justified to protect Americans from drug trafficking, but Congress has not authorized the use of military force in these operations. Trump has openly suggested that he might expand these operations from sea to land, threatening to start hitting cartel targets on Venezuelan soil without seeking a declaration of war or formal congressional approval, even though the U.S. Constitution reserves the power to declare war to Congress. In remarks reported by Time magazine, Trump said the U.S. had knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by water, and that it was going to start now hitting land with regard to the cartels. He has also publicly said that he wouldn't ask Congress for authorization to strike land targets against cartels, implying that he would simply act without approval. Even members of his own Republican Party have acknowledged that his unilateral actions raise serious legal questions. A bipartisan war powers resolution aimed at blocking further military action without congressional authorization was introduced in the Senate. Though it failed by a narrow margin, it showed that lawmakers from both sides understand that the president's expansion of force without oversight sets a dangerous precedent. Democratic lawmakers have been even more explicit, calling Trump's military action against Venezuela illegal due to the lack of authorization from Congress, and warning that such actions undermine U.S. global credibility. This isn't a policy debate on narcotics. This is a front in Trump's broader assault on democratic norms, one in which the president acts first and tells Congress about it later or never. Let's be crystal clear about what we are seeing. A president excluding elected state leaders from official White House events simply because they are from the opposing party. A president emboldening partisanship in institutions meant to be bipartisan. A president questioning constitutional limits on military force and hinting at expanding combat operations without congressional approval. A president who interprets dissent and disagreement not as part of governance, but as a personal attack and punishes accordingly. This is not normal. This is not traditional. This is not statesmanship. This is revenge. This is a man afraid of oversight, afraid of accountability, and afraid of anyone who might expose how little he understands the Constitution he swore to uphold. when he excludes governors from the White House based on party affiliation and publicly signals willingness to skirt the constitutional war powers designed to prevent unchecked executive adventurism. He isn't leading, he's retaliating. He's using the power of the office to carve out a kingdom of personal loyalty and punish those who refuse to bow. And make no mistake, this is not about safety. It is not about unity. It is about control. So now we ask you, the viewer, the listener, the citizen, would you let this stand? Would you normalize the exclusion of dissenting voices from the highest levels of government? Would you let a president circumvent constitutional authority simply because it serves his narrative? If your answer is no, then take action. Share this video. Talk about it with your community. Hold leaders accountable. Because if we allow power to go unchecked, if we don't challenge these abuses, then today's revenge plot becomes tomorrow's precedent. We are anonymous. We are watching, and we urge you to stay vigilant.